There was this one video, Why Linear Cities Don't Work by Stuart Hicks that I saw a while ago. It got like 6 million views. I wanted to show it to her because she's a student in what?
Urban planning.
All right. I thought I would show it to her and then we can see her thoughts on it. So let's just start first by the trailer and then the actual video.
Yep.
And
humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place.
the kind of crazy
Imagine a
with trailer.
traditional
They put a lot of budget.
The line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. Access to all their daily needs within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. And the line's infrastructure makes it possible to travel end to end in 20 minutes with no need for...
It means like you have like transport systems like on all sides, but it needs to be silent enough so like you can live right above or like underneath it.
Seems pretty tall though.
Yeah.
Leveraging AI technology, services are autonomous, saving you
This
time
one-
and effort. Design...
No, okay, fuck. I'm gonna pause it. Because like the images look amazing, you know, like when you see this, it looks really cool and I kind of get excited. But then if you have like multiple floors, for example, either you need to have holes for the light to come through, because
Yeah.
if you only have light from the top,
Or it's only artificial light, which sounds terrible.
The line is 500 meters tall,
yeah, right.
200 meters wide,
It's love, but not
170
so-
kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. The line is designed as a series of unique communities, offering a wealth of amenities, providing equitable
Alright.
views and immediate access to the surrounding nature. With 40% of the world accessible within 6 hours at the heart of the globe's key trade routes.
You thought it.
So wait, it's all like sustainable, blah, 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 but it's in the middle of nowhere, but it's accessible
of the
to
desert.
of the desert.
With like
But it's
natural
accessible
water
to like
and, yeah,
40% of the world, so by plane
in the desert.
in the desert.
Yeah.
And like they have to bring food and stuff to the
Yeah, but it's sustainable.
Mm,
I don't know how, but
how?
The line, the city that delivers new wonders for the world.
Alright.
and this could be like a trailer for a movie, to be honest. Like the video was
Yeah.
really well made. Like,
Before we dive into like the other guy's analysis, the trailer goes crazy, honestly. Really, really good. But I don't know, I'm not 100% convinced. I don't know if it's the best place. Like, I don't know if I would love to live there, but considering all the sustainability things, like, yeah, I understand one of the biggest issues that like urban planners are dealing with right now is like urban sprawl. So like the fact that cities are growing and growing, they're just like sprawling around, and people are trying to make cities that are denser, more dense, which this is definitely it. But what we were saying before is that it's in the middle of the desert. How are you gonna grow food? Like, unless you're thought about like urban farming or stuff like that. Okay, maybe like can you still
You
like
can do a
feed
little
like
bit,
9
but-
million people?
yeah, exactly. Like the amount of people you have to feed, right? I don't know if you can have farms outside of the line itself. And if you do have farms outside of the line, like let's say right next to it or something, then you still didn't solve the sprawling thing.
I'm not 100% convinced right now. Like, I feel like if they did that anywhere else, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. All right. But I wanted to ask, because like one thing is like where it is and like if this specific project makes sense. But because this one is like why linear cities don't work, with the general idea of the building, do you like that or not?
There's points that work and others that don't. In the sense that the fact that, you know, there's no need for cars, you have everything close to, there's this, like, it's called the 15-minute city. So it would be like cities where you have access to everything you need in like a 15-minute radius. You have access to everything, and that does make sense. You're compacting everything in one place, that does make sense. The fact that also it's compact also means that you use less resources because, you know, obviously if you have a house here and then the next house is like 120 kilometers away, then you still have to like provide water, electricity, roads, food,
to
to all
go
this,
fast,
like it
yeah.
uses a lot of
Like the
resources. I
infrastructure,
forget where.
yeah.
Yeah, in the infrastructure. So if you have everything in like a compact, like, less resources, so that's cool. But how much would you actually enjoy living in? I feel like the nice things of living in cities is that you can walk around and you have
Yeah.
things to see and it's different. You have different houses and buildings and architecture and vibes, you know? Like
I wonder
you
how
go
that
from
would
like
be.
one neighborhood to another and you feel a difference.
You don't want everything to be the same, to be controlled all the time.
So
You're
first now,
positive, but
Yeah.
questions.
Questions.
Okay, me too.
Neom is a proposal for a city that's actually under construction to be housed entirely within a single 170-kilometer or 105-mile long line. That's about the width of a typical block here in Chicago. It's also 500 meters or 1,600 feet tall, and that's a bit taller than the Hancock Tower. And then it goes for 105 miles. All this built volume is meant to house 9 million people, and that so happens to be about the same population as Chicago. Well, not the city of Chicago, rather the Chicago metropolitan area. That would be like taking the length of Neom and making an entire square out of it. That's the area, the Chicago metropolitan density that it would take to house the same amount of people that Neom proposes to do. So in one sense, the ambition of Neom is a welcome one, to take up less land than a sprawling city would take up. While I am certainly not advocating for this project, it's fraught with all sorts of problems. The world's population is expanding rapidly, and some argue that we can no longer just sit around and wait for cities to...
Sorry, I just thought about something. He said that Chicago is the metropolitan area of Chicago is 9 million people. You can house 9 million people in that line. Switzerland just passed the bar of 9 million inhabitants. So you could pull like the entirety of Switzerland in that line.
More importantly, now than ever, cities must be pre-planned and they need to be built quickly and efficiently. Since the Industrial Revolution, cities prioritized machines, cars, and factories over people. He also claimed
this I agree with, but then I just want to say, because from the video we saw before, it's not very clear how it's going to be inside and like how to live in it, right? They talked about the building, but like human size. So if it
it's
really
also
prioritizes
like 500 meters tall, so like it means
you can
that
put
like
a lot of floors. Right?
but like it means that when you're on the ground floor, if you can see like all the way up, if it's open, like you feel like really tiny.
If you have money, you should raise the bar and create something innovative and different. But a cursory look at the history and evolution of linear cities like Neom quickly reveals that they aren't a particularly new idea, and they are actually the epitome of urban design concepts that came out of the Industrial Revolution. Urban theorist Kevin Lynch went so far as to call linear cities the direct expression of machine values. They are the result of thinking of the city as a power station or an assembly line. To take the dehumanizing aspects of linear cities even further, in fact, Neom's advocates claim that artificial intelligence will be the beating heart of the city. Artificial intelligence will be central to many of the city's operations, including the healthcare system, which Neom bosses claim will add 10 years to a resident's life.
I don't know about that. That feels like just very random marketing bullshit, I guess. But on one side, that's one thing that is true. I don't know if it's about the shape, like the line specifically, but more about the fact that like it's a new city you're building from scratch. If you're building like one big city from scratch, especially like since it's like a unified, like a closed space, like not just a bunch of buildings, means that you can hopefully like technically control every little aspect of the city, and you could kind of like optimize things like crazy at every level, right? And then you can also kind of because you're building from scratch, you can kind of like build around like the social aspects of things. Where do people hang out? How do you live here? And then also like all the political systems and everything else. And so you can build the life of people from zero.
Yeah, which
you don't like that.
I don't know. I feel like controlling every little parameter when it comes to like climate or being like sustainable or stuff like that. That's a good way to ensure that you don't use too many resources, that you use them in a good way, that like waste is like controlled and all of that things. But then when you start like controlling every single thing, you're just living in a dystopian world. Like you're just like directly into Black Mirror, where you have a grade if you're not like the perfect citizen.
Yeah.
Just weird. Like you don't want this. There's spaces that, you know, sometimes that's also a good thing when spaces aren't really meant for anything and then anyone can use them as they want. If you just like give like a green space and then some kids are gonna play, some people have dogs, you're gonna have cats roaming around and you're gonna have like people reading, and that's just what creates life and the culture. And I think it's weird if you try to like build a culture from scratch.
But I'm interested in how cities are designed from scratch. And the question remains, why don't we build line cities? At first glance, linear cities seem like a great option. They offer the promise of efficient transportation networks, reduced reliance on cars, and the ability to house a larger population within a smaller land area. However, despite their potential advantages, we don't have a lot of linear cities strung across the globe. But that doesn't mean there's a lack of proposals out there or that they don't exist at all. The design would cut through the countryside, putting people closer to nature and encouraging agriculture. And the lack of intersections would reduce congestion and improve traffic flow. It would also be easier to provide public transportation, as a linear layout would allow for the creation of dedicated lanes to mass transit. The idea was, as the city expanded, additional sectors would be added to the end of each band so that the city would become ever longer without growing any wider. Well, this sounds pretty radical, and it was at the time. When you look at the area that was developed according to these principles as it looks today, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find the original line. It's here.
I mean, this model here, like, I like the idea still, but like a line where people have like single houses, that feels like a bad idea right away, right? There's going to be a moment where somebody builds another building behind their house.
Yeah.
Like whatever, and then now you start going sideways.
Obviously, what you're saying about single houses, it's also like obviously like symptomatic of like that time where like the idea of living in a building was just like for poor people. Like
the goal was like you want that.
Yeah, honestly, but it's like this idea that you want like a single house with like your backyard and like the white picket fence and 2 kids in a car. That was kind of like the vibe, so you know, makes sense. The plans that they showed, there's like 2 lines of houses with like a road on each, like in the middle. In that case, like the Saudi Arabia project makes more sense because it's like contained.
That's the thing, right? I feel like you could make that make sense, especially if you go 3D, like where you go in height instead of just having it on the floor. That changes everything, right? So like if you can go high as well for like the architecture of it, let's say, or the planning, I think that could make sense. But then the fact that it's contained, now you can call it kind of like a limited city, right?
Yeah.
Because then here, if it's not contained,
and
5 minutes and it's
But also they say that the guy said himself, like the goal was to just build the 5 first kilometers and then keep building.
Keep building.
So like you're not solving the urban sprawl problem at all. You're just like
you just go one direction.
you're just going one direction, and then at some point you're like in the middle of Portugal.
We kind of already have important linear streets and corridors in all of our cities. And the implementation of Soria's design doesn't quite make it to the scale of something that we call a city today. Lines work well in cities, not as cities. But also, the city didn't really grow according to the linear mandate. The city consumed the linear part and absorbed the entire development within its larger fabric. This is also reason number 2 for why linear indoor cities don't work. They don't grow evenly. Lynch says, thus one activity cannot grow faster than another, unless its neighbor declines with equal speed. It is, in fact, very difficult to keep development from accreting along the edges, which are so close to good access. But pooling everything into a big linear building isn't particularly new either. The goal is for this city to span from New York City to San Francisco. One single line, the width of an average house, stretching across the entire country. This idea was so influential at the time that Thomas Edison donated his patent for single-pour concrete houses as a method to be able to construct, and William H. Boyles donated his patent for monorail design. Road town is like a highway, and to keep things moving, you can't have too many stops along the way, or it'll slow everything down. So
there's just one big difference. Like Road Town, they said it was like the width of like a single-story house or something. That's like nothing. But some of the other ones had like multiple layers of like belts and maybe different streets and even maybe fields or whatever. So it's just that the city is on a line, but the city can be more than just buildings, right? Like if you think of the city as, or like the agglomeration or the metropolitan area, like including fields, for example, your line could be like 2 kilometers wide, but like you keep going, right? So here, clearly just one house. That's just a weird idea, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like
But
that.
I guess it's like almost what the line is, because it said
It's
it was like
200 meters.
yeah, 200 meters, not.
It's not a lot. You can have different speeds and levels of travel on the same floor if it's 200 meters wide. You could go down 15 floors, for example, and have like 10 layers of metros and subways and trains
Just
and
going
whatever.
everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. Then you could
Some
have
that
one
go
and
like that only go from one end to the other,
Yeah,
some that
yeah.
stop like every 10 whatever, some that stop every
exactly.
2 minutes. Yeah.
So you could. So I feel like some of these technical problems, like I understand the point, but I feel like if you put enough time, money, infrastructure, and a technology to it, it's like something you can solve, like a technical problem to solve.
But you end up needing to have different networks dedicated to local traffic versus the high-speed one. While Rotown was a dream for a new city design, many others have been proposed as pragmatic solutions to existing conditions. A good example of this is the Linear City project by Peter Eisenman and Michael Graves. Their proposal was to connect various cities on the west coast of the United States with parallel strips, one of them for industry and the other for housing, offices, and stores. All of these proposals lack urban centers. Instead, they rely on pre-existing cities to be able to provide them. Urban centers are important psychologically, and urban cities don't have them. To be in a city without a center makes us feel lost and uncomfortable.
Sorry, this one I disagree with as well. So just quick
Berlin.
points. What?
Berlin.
Berlin. Because I was thinking Berlin, but then I was also thinking like any city, once it becomes like big enough, because here we're in Lausanne, for example. In Switzerland, it's like 100,000 people, something like this. You have like a real center of the city. But if you think of a city like Paris, 3-4 million, or even worse, like Tokyo, which has 12 million, like at that point, does the center really matter? Because like you could live on any of the neighborhoods and spend your whole life without ever going on the center of the city.
I feel like it's also a little bit of like past ideas, because we know that there are a lot of cities that are like multi-centric. Like you have different centers that either, because like it's such a big city that you like have centers that serve like different purposes. For example, here in Lausanne, there's like, it's not even in the city, but like the university and EPFL, like they're not even in the city, but they're like part of Lausanne, but they represent a educational and research like center, like a development, like creative hub or something. But like you can have like educational and research center, and you can have like, even here in Lausanne, there's the Flon, which is like the recreational and party center, and then you have maybe
so you have all these exactly. So then and this is like a small city like Lausanne, right? So like this is not even like and he's talking about Chicago, which is 9 million as well. I feel like you probably don't have one specific center, but so again, just for, I don't think this would work in every
maybe
line
Chicago
project.
is a little different because they're American cities, but
Great. There's like, God, they're trying to get hated on the comment.
No, but like it is true. Okay, they're like,
it's a different way to.
It's different, like Chicago, and I can tell you like the whole theory, but like there's like centric circles that were made like this, where you actually have a city center that is actually in the center of the city, and then it sprawls with like, you know, like low income housing, and then you have like an industrial place or with buildings and like stuff like that, and then you go outside and you have like housing, which would be like the suburbs and stuff like that. Like it's meant to be that way. I don't really remember the order and whatever. Again, in a line, I feel like you could have a sense of centrality, of centers that have different purposes. Like even in the line, you have your block, you could be like here on the 5th floor, or even like the 5th floor is the party floor, and you only have like clubs all over the 5th floor, or I don't know, or like this section is like the educational thing, and you have like schools, middle school, high schools, university, colleges, whatever, in that like place.
You could have that specific thing, like it maybe doesn't work in 2D so much, but like in 3D, especially if you have like good transport system, you could have, for example, let's say the fashion center, like the nightlife center, is on the 30th floor all the way to the west of the city, like on one complete side of the line. If the thing goes on for like 5 kilometers, you could have like a little hole somewhere, which is like, I don't know, 50 meters by 20 meters. And great, it's like a big window that comes in, fresh air, whatever, and maybe it's like on top of a park or something, like between floor 5 and 15.
Encompassing all of humanity within its...
Just to like... Sorry. No, but like what you were saying about being ugly, also the line project in Saudi Arabia is ugly, but I think it's because even if it's like glass and so it kind of blends in, it's just like the fact that it's in the middle of the desert and you see that there's like little hills and stuff, like it really doesn't feel organic at all. And I feel that you could have the same concept without being like a block. Like without actually, like it can be a line without being like a straight line. If you have like more rounded edges or maybe like go around the hill a little bit or something, like it would feel way more organic. Like what we're seeing there, it's just weird that it's like hugging the hills almost, but it's very straight. Like if you did something that hugged the mountains, but more...
Not so straight.
The structure was made up of a series of interconnected modules that were designed to house all of the basic needs and functions of human society, such as housing, transportation, communication, and leisure. One thing that I think this dystopian project illustrates is that linear cities offer residents almost no sense of choice. There are only 2 options for movement. They also limit choice in other ways as well. They require a high level of planning and coordination in order to be successful. They rely on the development.
Again, I feel technical issues that you could fix with technical solutions, you know? And to be honest, like this last argument here that he's having with kind of like that it encapsulates everything, etc. Yes, like my suggestion here, and especially like if you want to have more choice inside the city, because like that's the thing, like you always think of it as like one line on the map, but then if you're inside this building and it's so huge, sometimes you're inside these malls, you can spend like a weekend and not find the exit, you know. And so like if it's one of these huge things, now it's 200 meters wide, it doesn't mean that you have one street. You could have multiple streets and like multiple layers of houses, and so it's still like a neighborhood but just goes on. So you could have like a full block, and let's say like the suggestion here is like literally make it bigger. Yeah. Instead of 200 meters, make it like 1 kilometer wide.
But even like have 200 meters is a lot. Like you don't even have to have like roads and avenues, but like even like it is a straight line, but as you're saying, in that straight line, you can have little paths. You can have like inside that house, you don't have to have like straight blocks of housing and buildings. You could have like smaller houses, bigger ones. You can have like
those little villages in Italy or like Santorini in Greece. It's like you could have all that type of buildings and housing inside, and like that feeling inside like 200 meters or 500 meters, where you make it go over like 1 kilometer, and you have that experience.
Like if you're doing like the non-natural thing, you can also make it like completely non-natural and like pretend that it is.
Can you actually build something like this and like realistically make it work? Is it like second category, like is it a nice place to live or not? And for the first two, it's like there might be ways, you know, like you can make that happen. Number 3 then is like, is this like would this be better or better like than a normal city? Better you could judge with like yes to live or whatever, or to operate or whatever, or sustainability, for example. Is it more sustainable than the city or not? Or because like yes you use less land, but everything you need to make it work in the end becomes worse anyways. That could be possible. And then number 4 is that you have the sustainability of each project specifically, right? So maybe if you build the same line in the middle of the desert, no. But like if you build it in the middle of the US, for example, like in California somewhere, or I don't know, around the lake here in Geneva, Lausanne, something like this, maybe that would work. As we talk about it, it doesn't feel like it's a bad idea in general, you know? Like everything he said up until now, like you could fix that. You could find ways.
How possible is it to fix this? I don't know. I'm not an engineer or anything. But like I feel like this video in itself was, I mean, we haven't finished it yet for 1 minute.
2 minutes,
But it's more like he's a little bit like radical. It's like, it's not a good idea, it doesn't work. And I'm like, you know what, I don't think it's the perfect project, but could it work? Sure, probably. If you do some twitches here and there. I'm not convinced about everything, but we've been discussing like other options, and I think like
there's a way
be feasible. It's just like that project, as they've shown us. No. The video was really well made. But what I'm thinking is that it was really focused on a very like technical and theoretical point of view, like very urban studies, human geography, like very technical point of view, which is obviously important because that's how you build cities. But I think it was missing a little bit of just like other point of views. Like, it's like in a city, like he was criticizing the fact that linear cities were only like, they weren't built for people, but he didn't take into account the people in his analysis. You know what I mean? Like, when you think about a city, it's like the city in itself, like the building and the engineering part, but it's also the people that live in there, the culture that you build, what people make of it. And it's not because like in the cities that we know right now, things have been happening that way, that if you don't put them in another environment, they're not going to develop in some other way, you know? And so that's, point, I feel like, and that what we were saying like about the centers, he said that you feel lost when you're in a city or in a place that doesn't have a center. Well, if that's the case, people are going to build centers because they need it in order to feel comfortable in their environment.
You could also ask, like, are you lost because, like, do you feel lost because the city needs a center and that's it? Or is it because all the cities you know up until now have the center and that's just how it's been, but it doesn't need to be like that?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that could also be like a whole... Yeah. Alright, but this one was a pretty interesting point, this one on like the technical aspects and like thinking of the people.
Yeah.
Alright. Could make a whole video on that.
Yeah, probably.
The development of efficient transportation networks and the coordination of land use and zoning regulations. These types of projects can be a challenge to implement, to the point that it almost requires an authoritarian regime just to implement and control.
If I use like a cartoon as an example.
Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about, you know, fuck, this is really bad. You know the movie WALL-E? WALL-E?
Oh yeah, with the
like when they like all the people, they live
in their
like a spaceship.
Yeah.
So it is a contained place, and like okay, it was meant to like didn't like.
It looked nice, like
honestly. If everybody wasn't just like obese and just like stuck on their screen, like I feel like. Obviously, it's a cartoon, so I'm not gonna like, but it could work.
And the development of efficient transportation networks and the coordination of land use and zoning regulations. These types of projects can be a challenge to implement, to the point that it almost requires an authoritarian regime just
to implement does not mean
possible. Also continues to describe the misguided nature of linear cities, the separations, the oversimplification. The pure aesthetics of the working machine seem cold and repellent if we imagine ourselves actually living in these ideal places. They are founded on a conception of the city, which seems basically wrong.
We were pretty much done already, but you see, this is the same thing he was saying at the very beginning of the video, like that quote about the cities built for the industry and the machines and all these different things, etc. And the linear city is kind of like the extreme example of that. It's like, first, I'm not sure if I agree. I kind of see the points, but like I'm not sure 100%. You know.
Yeah.
But so, and I understand many of the points, and so many of the points he probably simplified for the video. But I feel like most of these points, like I had like suggestions at least, you know, like at least ideas that like you could potentially solve this.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I also think we had a lot of like questions, and a lot of were just like we suppose we could make this, or we suppose that it's that way and so they should do that, but we also don't really have like enough information on the actual line. Like, how is it really gonna be? How are, you were saying before, how are people actually gonna live in there? How is it gonna like be organized? How and I feel like a lot of
But that's what I'm missing up to now, because like I watched a couple of videos on this project, and so I haven't done any deep digging or anything, but like a couple of videos at least, and everybody always talks about like the shape and the fact it's aligned, but I don't see
How
a
do
lot
you
of
actually
things.
live in
Yeah,
there?
like how is it inside? You know, like how
Yeah.
does it look like? How do you live?
But
Yeah.
you know what? I feel like the people that are building that, they don't even know. Like, no, like just seeing like the trailer kind of thing. It's weird talking about a trailer for like
Yeah,
a city,
yeah.
but anyway, like that trailer video just really seemed like, again, it's just like somebody that has a ton of money and they want to do something. But you know what? I'm really excited actually, because apparently they're already building that thing. So I'm really like excited to see like how it's gonna
But I'm
come
wondering, 'cause,
together
like, this-
and like.
This I don't know much about this, so maybe you have a better idea. But like when they say they're building it, is it actually like they started building? Like there's something on the ground. There's like, yeah, we're working on it, you know, and then we'll.
You know what? Like
There's no okay.
I feel like when they say like it's in construction, it means like there's like a stone somewhere that's been put.
Alright.
You know.
Alright.
But again, for like such, first of all, infrastructure like buildings always takes time, and something like that where they're building like a metro or like public
Yeah, it's
transport
like a
and
whole
housing
thing,
and
yeah.
stuff in the middle of the desert means that, you know what, we're not gonna see the light of this for like at least 20 years.
Yeah.
So because you gotta think like they're building like a tramway here.
Yeah.
They've been talking about it since the 2000s, so it's been 20 years in the making, and they're building it now. And it's gonna be, the first part is gonna be ready in like 2 years. I really hope that they just made the video and now they're gonna take like 10 more years to like really think about it.
But maybe
like,
was
let's
that the,
really like, you
that
know,
was the strategy. You know? Let's make a really good YouTube video, and then we'll see the feedback and the suggestions.
But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. What
Like,
do they say? Yeah,
subscribe,
like,
comment.
subscribe, comment, do whatever, share with your friends and
Drop your
family if you
thoughts
like
in,
it. And yeah, let us know what you think about it. Do you agree with us? Do you think we're like, everything we said is just like stupid? Maybe. Let us know. Please don't be too mean.
Bye.